Really excited to be here. It's a great conference. I want to have the folks introduce themselves, but I'll do a really quick intro about me. So my name is Ryan Kenny. I'm a managing director in KPMG's finance transformation practice. Spend a good majority of my time working with large Fortune 500 companies focused on doing transformation in their FP&A function. Spend a lot of time working with sort of the EPM systems part of it, the data and analytics. So I'm really excited to get the perspectives of these folks here today on a litany of sort of subtopics within Smart and Savvy and FP&A. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Derek first to introduce yourself and a little bit about your company and your role, and we'll kind of just do that down the line.
Sure. Am I on? Yes? Okay, great. So I'm Derek Warnick. I'm the CFO and co-founder of a company called Electric Hydrogen. We are headquarters here in Massachusetts, also have facilities in the Bay Area. We make very large hydrogen electrolyzers. So these are huge systems that take in renewable energy and water, split that water into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen can be used as a substitute for natural gas in many industrial processes, reducing emissions and in many cases reducing costs as well. From a personal perspective, I am a MIT Sloan MBA grad, so very happy to be up here on stage speaking with you today.
So I'm Ludovic Monchal. I'm the CFO Americas for Dassault Systems. We are a publicly traded company, French company, a software provider. We help companies in their innovation, product innovation. We started as a CAD company, computer-aided design, and slowly we expanded to all the processes of innovation with to help our customers accelerate their time to market. I've been with that company for quite some time, a little more than 20 years now. I joined as a CFO at the time in a product division after having spent 8 years with Deloitte. And since then, I've been a CFO for many different divisions. And in between two CFO jobs, I took over the global financial planning and analysis for the company, where I went through a transformation, which we'll probably discuss about.
Valerie?
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Valerie Bauer-Gore. I'm the CFO of NAC. NAC is a private equity-backed no-code software business with a target of small and medium-sized businesses. So if you're not familiar with no-code software, it allows you to build software applications without actually coding, lots of drag and drop. And people use that to customize, have a lower cost. I mean, we have customers who build their whole business on our no-code software. I have been in B2B SaaS for about the past 15 years at a whole variety of companies, from small in the sub $10 million range to very large, $30 billion companies, and have worked in public, private, VC-backed, and private equity-backed, and I'm happy to be here today.
Great. And last but not least, Doug?
Yeah, I'm Doug Orsog. I'm with OneStream. For those of you who heard about OneStream earlier today, we're that cockpit for the office of the CFO. We help them understand what they need to do, when they need to do, and how they act on stuff. We work with them all the way through the close and consolidation process, the full record to report process, as well as the full plan to act process, putting all in one single data model. We allow them to make one decision that grows with them and is infinitely extensible in how they do about their business. And we also empower that with AI. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that later on. My background a little bit, I'm vice president of value transformation at OneStream. And what we do is we have a team that gets together with folks as they're starting their journey or on their journey, and help them understand what are the specific capabilities that we bring to the table that are going to solve their business problems. So we really focus on their processes. Been doing this at OneStream for about 4 years. Prior to that, I did it at another software company for about 6 years. Prior to that, I was, in many cases, still am a recovering CFO. I was CFO of a global telecom company. We put fiber in the ground all throughout the United States, Canada, and the UK. If you've ever been to a premiership game and you like your Wi-Fi in the UK, I'll take full credit. If not, we had nothing to do with that one. They clearly were not, they had been relegated before that. Before that, I was CFO of a real estate company, worked out the portfolio from this small investment bank that had gone under called Lehman Brothers. So worked out a lot of that. Part of that, I was a CPA at PwC, still am a CPA. And I'm a chartered financial analyst. I was at Robinson Humphrey, an investment bank in Atlanta, Georgia before that. And really, I want to give you that full background. Our perspective when we talk to folks like y'all is we want to understand your problems and help them solve your problems and focus on your processes. A little bit less on the technology. We'll explain how that enables your success, but really want to build a roadmap with you to be successful. Thank you, Ron.
So as you can see, we have very sort of diverse mix here of individuals, industries that they represent, and importantly, sort of different stages of the life cycle. Right? We have a very well-established company with Dassault from where Luda works, and then between Valerie and Derek, we're going to get some perspectives here of sort of up-and-coming growth stage companies, where the topic of FP&A across these, right, are going to be a little bit different, similar at the core, right, but there's going to be different perspectives on how to use data, thoughts around AI and use cases around AI, et cetera. And then Doug, of course, has this great wealth of perspectives working with a lot of large organizations nationally, going down the path of trying to modernize their back office through the use of the OneStream platform. So I think it logically makes sense, right, if we're going to talk about FP&A, to really start at the start, if you will, and start to talk about sort of the strategic planning process. In my experience, when I go into a lot of organizations, historically, it's changing. Historically, though, we've seen a lot of people that treat strat planning as almost a separate group of individuals, a separate process that's a little bit disconnected from the day-to-day forecasting and analytics. So I wanted to get the full panel's perspectives here on how they attack strategic planning and sort of connect the CFO's agenda to the broader organization's agenda. So I think with that, maybe we'll start with Luda this time and kind of hear what's going on with your organization.
Yeah, I'm going to start with the size. I didn't mention the size of the company. So we do about $7 billion in revenue, right? Half of it in the US. So that gave us the time and the resources actually to organize processes, I would say, in a very structured way, right? And the strat planning, and by extension, I'm going to add the long range, any type of long range planning, has always been an essential component on the planning process. We actually spend more time on the strat plan and the 3-year plan. We have a 3-year rolling planning, right? Than we would do on detailing the first year of an operational plan. It's very governed. There is a very strong governance around it. It's a process we start in July. The teams are all working on defining the 3-year horizon in their respective segment. We typically start from the product organizations and we end with the sales. That's typically how we organize it. Pretty detailed. It's driver based. I think we're going to be talking about drivers in a little bit as well. It's essentially driver based, and that's the cornerstone for anything that comes down the road. Once we have the go ahead in the various organization, and the stamp coming from board meetings. Around the September timeframe, then we can go ahead and start with the subsequent phases of the plan. And it's not something up in the air because we are really challenging the organizations. So they cannot just give us fluff, right? So we go back. I mean, we have done 3-year plans now. We went back to the 3-year plans we had been provided or we had generated the year before, and started to challenge the business on deviations and why and how, and corrective actions that will need to be done to get back on track on a long-term basis. So that's what we have.
So do you want to kind of compare the process at your organization, Derek? You know, a little bit, I think, formed to 2020, is that right?
That's right, yeah. So business was founded in late 2020, so we're younger, but we're approaching 400 people. We've raised close to $800 million, so a lot of capital in the business. And I think our approach to strategic planning is definitely, it's different. Right? We are not as large and established an organization. We're also not profitable yet. Hopefully we are soon, but that means that our strategic planning and our financial planning kind of tie together on ground truth. We're very, very focused on our cash position, very focused on our expenses. We spend a lot of money, and it's relatively lumpy. If you're buying a $30 million piece of manufacturing equipment, that's pretty meaningful to a business like us. And we have to really think about our strategic plan also in light of capital formation. So when is the next time that we're going to need to raise capital? What form is that going to take? Is it going to be another equity round? Will we bring in another credit facility? Will we think about further interesting approaches such as equipment finance, which is how we did a bulk of our financing for our manufacturing facility up in Devens, Massachusetts. And I think for us, the process is a little bit more organic, a little bit less regimented. We've got a good system in place that works, but it's really speaking with our engineers and speaking with our team and understanding how are we going to spend this capital, where's it going to come from, and make sure that we've got plenty in the bank. That leads to both a short-term and a long-term plan that hopefully come together over the course of years for us to continue to run the business in a way that makes sense and drives toward growth. And we should do a little over $100 million of revenue next year, but that's from one sale that we're performing on. So that's what I mean by a lumpy business.
So I would imagine we heard a little bit about organizational agility and the ability to flex and be a little bit quick and light on your feet. I imagine that's sort of name of the game.
Absolutely.
With what you guys are doing.
Yes.
Valerie, similar scenario or a little bit different?
Similar in many ways. We are, like I mentioned, I work for a private equity-backed company. We're 2 years into the investment. And the first 2 years have been spent a lot on fixing a lot of things that were breaking and really building that foundation for growth. So we are actually just now really into more strategic planning for the first time of how are we really going to accelerate that growth, how are we going to build enterprise value, and looking at both organic and non-organic ways to increase the value of the company. And again, we have the same constraints in regards to what do we have for cash to invest and managing the financials, so making sure the strategy is very linked to the financial position we have today and where we need to go.
So Doug, if you want to bring it home from what you're hearing from the group and sort of what you're also seeing out in the market.
Well, I think you start with why. One of the first questions we ask when we go in and talk to folks is, first of all, do you do it? You'll be surprised at how many people don't. But if you do it, why do you do it? And then we always kind of get a quizzical look, and it's like, well, because we have.
Right.
We always have, and this is part of our process. Well, you do it because it's part of the overall financial process. That long-range plan should be feeding your budget, and that should be where it all starts. And those drivers that are in your long-range plan should be showing up in your budget. And then the budget's wrong the first day of the calendar year, so we got to reforecast. And how do we make sure that we're accounting for that? Where we find that people stumble at this is that long-range plan is something separate. It's that 2-week retreat the executives take in February where they go out and say, this is what we're going to do. It's not being fed by their actuals, not being fed by their forecast. And so when we see an exceptional long-range planning process, it's actually not a separate process. It's almost cyclical in that it's being fed from the actuals. Those actuals then tell us what do we need to do this year. We're setting those drivers. And those drivers are what we expect to see in the business. And there's one way to make sure we do not see those flow throughout the business, and that's use Excel as our system. Because everyone has their own version on their computer. And so really focusing on, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, I think, Ryan.
Yep.
Really focus on that underlying the long-range plan. That's really where that single data model really needs to start and really needs to reside.
Yeah, so I think it's a great segue. And so it's almost impossible to have an FP&A conversation and not get into data, right? Data is sort of the lifeblood of what we do, what you do to sort of run your business, develop those insights, take action, right? And I think we heard it a little bit this morning on the Kenview conversation, where we heard a little bit about, getting a little bit more down and granular, using not just internal data coming from their own systems, but actually leveraging, I believe it was data patterns and data signals around weather, right? And that would help to dictate when to sort of activate certain campaigns and otherwise to kind of follow the changing weather patterns that we're seeing. And that has some correlation to some of the products and how those products are being used. So when I think about sort of that long-range plan, that strat plan, right? A lot of my clients and a lot of what we're seeing, I think, KPMG does a survey every year to CFOs, and we saw something like 80% of CFOs that participated in that survey, even though I think we heard surveys are garbage this morning or something. I think there's some truth in surveys, right? That 80% of CFOs did sort of respond saying, hey, we are actually taking into account external information, whether that's competitor intelligence, whether that's the aforementioned sort of weather signals or other aspects that are out there, right? I had a client that was in the travel and leisure space, right? And so getting that TSA throughput data during COVID was incredibly valuable for them to kind of take a stance on, when are we getting back to normal or some semblance of normal. So with that long lead in to a strat plan and to a data question, right? What I want the group to kind of respond to is, how are you sort of taking into account external data sets and internal data sets, right? To kind of go away from just your typical Excel trends connected to your ERP, right? So I think maybe, Ludo, if you want to kick us off there, because I think you guys have some pretty good stories.
I think one of the main, when we do a strat plan, we usually start from, obviously we need to have a good understanding of where we are, right? So that's a prerequisite, I would say. But we typically start from a market analysis, right? Even though it's a rolling system, so we have that permanent survey and adjustment of where we think the market is going. So that's, I would say, we start with this type of elements. Customer situations. We are B2B business, right? So we sell essentially to large companies, right? So the situation and specific situation of certain clients is as well an important input in the strategic planning as far as we are concerned. And situation is not necessarily something we see in our internal data, right? So it's not previous sense. It's a certain it can be a certain way a segment is behaving. So that's the second component. Competitor assessment is also one of the main input to the strategic planning. We have a variety of portfolio. We have analysis and assessment and how the roadmap, our product roadmap, is going to fit gaps in our portfolio, and so it's essentially those parameters we are incorporating. Obviously, there is a component of sales data as well in terms of CRM, like pipeline. Even though we are looking at 3 years, so we don't necessarily have a 3-year pipeline, but we have components of long-term pipeline, opportunity pipeline, that are also giving us some good ideas as to where we think the business can go and how we can set challenging objectives to its various components. So that's in essence what we do during the strat planning.
So Doug, in terms of what you're seeing in your experiences, when we think about data and just data in general and how it actually you see a lot of different companies at different, stages of, their maturity life cycle. And generally speaking, if they're about to embark on some sort of a system implementation, the time is right to sort of challenge their thinking around legacy processes, historical approaches. I used to have a client that used to say, you hit it on, doing things just because we always did them, right? And he used to have a phrase, because I think he came up in one of the big four as well, and he had a partner that talked to him and said, oh, you're just talking about Sally Wally. And he would say, what does that mean? Same as last year, wrong as last year. You're just carrying forward the same, behaviors because it's comfortable. So from what you're seeing, and we think about, oh, I had to put in a new system, I got to think about my processes, how are people in organizations leveraging different data sets and different, and challenging the norms?
Yeah, and I think there's really two different aspects of that. First and foremost, they're thinking about the financial planning processes, so they think about their financial data. What kind of shape is that in? And oftentimes they'll find that it's lacking. It's not as good as they want it to be. They have multiple ERPs. They have some kind of data warehouse that the data is massaged, and that's as far back as they can drill back into it. When we talk about the strategic plan, you're also bringing in, as Ludo said, you're bringing in external data as well. You're bringing in operational data. You're bringing in market data. You're bringing in things that don't necessarily reside in finance, although when I was a CFO, I did try to jam it into my ERP, and that just gave me a fat ERP. But that is stuff that's required to do your strategic plan. And taking a step back rather than saying, hey, we need a system because right now we're on Excel or our systems are aged out, it's a good time to think about that process. And Ryan, we were talking a little bit earlier, the first thing I recommend is a global design. And think about what data are we going to need to ingest, what data we need for our strategic plan. What data are we going to need to make our budget not just an SG&A budget, but be able to do a top-down budget at the same time we're doing a bottoms-up budget. And bring in elements that aren't necessarily financial that are drivers. What I historically have seen is folks oftentimes have two things. They have an even number of drivers, and those drivers almost always are financial drivers that can be done through regression analysis. It's year-over-year growth. The reason they have an even number is typically the process started at some point in Excel, and you had a row and you had a column. And so those were our first two drivers. We want more drivers, we add a tab. We want more drivers, we add a tab. And we had this magic spreadsheet that brings all this stuff together. So when we started design, it's like, hey, how do we design the magic spreadsheet to be automated? And the challenge I have for them is, let's stop at the magic spreadsheet, take a step back. What data do you want to be driving your business? It may not be what you had before. And think outside of finance. We're not just doing an SG&A budget. We're not just doing an SG&A forecast. How do we get that operational information to be part of this overall budget? I specifically don't call it a financial budget when I talk to folks. I talk about the budget. And the one thing that always gets short shrift is capital planning. Talk about magic spreadsheets. There's a magic spreadsheet people fill out that gives them the ROI, and that's how I make our decisions. Having all that stuff in one place, in one system, and taking a step before you implement and thinking about what's that global design going to be, what's the data we're going to need, less than what's the process we're going to have to replicate, that's going to dictate what kind of change management you need to have.
Yeah. So, Derek, different lens, different perspective, right? You talked about, smaller organization, but growing, 300, 400 employees at this point. When you all, strat planning or otherwise, when you're actually trying to go and assess the viability of whatever initiative you're going after, what are the types of data that, in your situation, that you guys are working with, and what are the challenges, and how have you kind of overcome that?
So I think there's a couple kind of important things about our business that go into that long-term planning and strategic planning. One is we have a very long sales cycle from kind of first contact with a customer until we might be recognizing revenues on the order of 4 to 5 years. We have a 24-month lead time from when a customer has placed an order until we've actually installed that. So that does give us more insight a few years out about what revenue is likely to look like. But then things can change as well. And what I think that leads to us to be very kind of clear on is making sure with both as we think about prospective future revenue and weighting the probability of sales, as well as just thinking about our business generally, it's less about self-analysis. We don't have hundreds of thousands of data points about our business and 40 years of track record to say what's likely to occur based on what's happened inside of our business. We use a lot of data that's coming externally. For us, our product is converting from one commodity to another. We're essentially converting renewable energy, renewable electricity into hydrogen, which is a feedstock for industrial processes. So that leads us to spend a lot of time thinking about what are solar prices in Spain, right? What is offshore wind pricing looking like up in the Nordics, to understand what markets might make sense, which customers' transactions are actually going to close, and then thinking about what is our product being used for. If that's for hydrogen for production of ammonia-based fertilizer in the Midwest, how is that price trending? We look a lot at things like natural gas pricing because that is the product that we are really competing against. And that everything I just mentioned ties in a lot to geopolitics and to governmental programs, subsidies, incentives, or other risks. And so it's a lot of really messy data that we have to look at, but it's really important, and it allows us to have at least some indication about if the transactions we think that are going to go through will, and whether or not they're going to be profitable enough for a customer that they're likely to do repeat business, or is it something that this is one and done. So we spend a lot of time thinking about that, so we make sure that we've got a funnel and kind of a sales strategy that works, and that we come back and we build a business that will kind of rise to meet the moment that we're going to need maybe 2 to 3 years in the future.
Awesome. So Valerie, when we were preparing for this a little bit, I think you kind of hit on what I think is probably a relevant story around sort of doing some customer margin analysis and sort of expanding outside of your traditional data sets as well. You want to speak to that for a minute?
A big focus of us has been to improve our gross margin, and as a SaaS business, that's largely focused on reducing our hosting costs. And so we've really have dove in to understand what those hosting costs are and how are the customer usage of our product and our platform driving those costs, and how we can better understand our individual customers. Can we change their usage? Do we need to increase the price for our custom plans? And then also understanding more of our list price customers and what are the different profit margins from a hosting perspective of all of those customers. And that's leading us into what should our prices be? Should we be, are they doing things that they shouldn't be able to do? Do we need to put guardrails in our product? And all of that. So it's all from changing behavior and looking at prices, but really having true insight of all of our customers and really diving into a lot of data and applying the usage for us. That would be APIs, a number of jobs, and SQL CRUD counts, and allocating that across our AWS costs. So we have a profit profile for all of our customers.
So we've somehow miraculously gotten this far into an FP&A conversation and not talked about AI. So it's a testament to us, not going for the low-hanging fruit just yet, but I think it's contractually required we bring it up. So we will talk about AI. So I think in terms of my perspectives at my own clients, right? I think there's a lot of curiosity. There's a lot of at the surface, there's a lot of excitement around it, but then there's also the hardest part for anybody in this situation is how do I actually start and actually get the value out of it, right? That's the big, I don't know how to get from where I am now to, the future state of AI sort of doing everything, right? So I think let's take a pulse on sort of what you're seeing, Doug, with some of the clients and the various customers you're seeing out there in terms of, one, are people able to adopt it and get some good use cases to share? But two, sort of what are those underlying foundational aspects that need to be in place to even achieve gains from leveraging AI?
Yeah, I think the first thing is a lot of folks, when you talk to them, everyone has an AI policy or an AI program. And then you dig a little deeper, and oftentimes it's not much deeper than that they can spell AI. And what we found for the folks who are the quote-unquote leaders in AI, oftentimes what they've done is they've invested a lot of capital in developing a capability. And if you ask them, so what's this capability for? It's like, we'll figure it out when we get there. So they build an AI infrastructure. It's not much different, I think, if we think back to when ERPs back in the 80s and the 90s were first starting to be constructed. People were building capabilities within an ERP. And I think folks who did that had some success, but they found that they had a lot of failures and a lot of time spent. That overnight success was 3 to 5 years. Folks adopting AI now cannot take 3 to 5 years to see some kind of benefit from that. So we've seen, similar to the ERP market, we've seen folks look for applications that help them with that. A lot of folks are trying to figure out, how do we take generative AI and help our business? And there are use cases there, but I think the use cases where people are seeing success is more on the machine learning end, where we're seeing this within our planning cycle and how can we put this into the planning cycle. So what we've seen our customers who have adopted this be successful, what they're doing is, I go back to talking about the drivers in that long-range plan. Well, historically, we were able to do drivers we had regression analysis on. We could do year-over-year growth, stuff we knew. What we couldn't do, because it wasn't humanly possible, and there were so many of them, we couldn't bring in some of these outside factors that may not show an immediate correlation or maybe a lag in the correlation. But we're able to bring stuff where we could run time series on this stuff and make that part of our drivers in our long-range plan. And now when we do our budget is less that Excel template that we sent out that people fill in, and they are now reacting to as opposed to creating a budget. A budget's been created with those drivers. Now, as an individual business unit owner, I may say, listen, those drivers don't necessarily apply to me. I call it, okay, from a pull-down menu. Change some of those factors, change some of those features. And now they're building and reacting to. So it takes that 80% time we're building our budget, having that disconnected long-range plan, and now my budget is actually part of my long-range plan. It's just a different version with a different set of features that I'm able to score and test and do that time series forecasting on and test back. And then, and this is where the real promise is, in forecasting, when we think about the forecasting process, really the first half of the forecasting process is variance analysis. Well, what if I'm told by scoring these features, scoring these drivers, that I know what caused those variances? I did a model for one of our data scientists, and he's a little bit younger. And in there, I drew a picture of a telephone. And he asked, what is that? And I said, well, that's what a lot of people do use for variance analysis. They'll call and ask what's happening. What if those drivers, those features, as part of that time series, as part of that quantitative AI, has told us what's already going on? And we're reacting to it. And now our forecast isn't this 4-day process of 3.5 days of compiling, a half a day of figuring it out, and it's a half a day of figuring it out. And it fundamentally changes the way people use that, because what we've seen our customers do who are doing this is they're not doing a monthly forecast anymore. They're doing a bi-weekly forecast. They're doing it during the month because it's not as reliant upon human beings doing manual processes to this. And it just wasn't physically, they weren't physically capable because you would have had to throw thousands of people at this. That's where I'm seeing success, and it's really more on the quantitative side. There's going to be the ChatGPT breakthrough at some point, and some folks are figuring it out. In the meantime, the quantitative is where we're seeing the biggest benefits.
Valerie, as a CFO of a PE-backed company, are there expectations to leverage AI more? Is there sort of mandates or edicts, or is it organically happening, or how's it working with you?
There is definitely a push. Again, I'm a smaller software company. I'm not looking on using AI so much in my own function. But from a PE perspective, they're really encouraging and pushing all their portfolio companies to be leveraging AI and how can they use it the best in the business to bring the business forward or to create efficiencies. Ways that we're using AI at our company is we use AI when people come in and want to start building their app. So you give a prompt and it tells them, and so you've already got your app, halfway built, and then you can continue to build from that. Also on our support, it's a great way for support to take tickets and to get a fast response and to reduce kind of the labor costs on support. I mean, those are some of the ways that we're using AI. But definitely as a PE firm, they're looking and pushing their portfolio companies to use it more in a way that it makes sense.
Ludo, I think you mentioned in some of our pre-meetings leading up to this that there is some use cases happening at Dassault, but I think you guys took a little bit more of a crawl, walk, run type of mentality, right?
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, as a company, we are not totally foreign to, I would say, AI, because we provide to our own customers, some generative design capabilities, which are essentially AI-based. But we haven't really set and defined a strategy for pushing or adopting AI massively on business applications, internal applications. We have bots. So we have created bots like, internal ChatGPT screens. So you ask questions and the system crawls through internal data. And it goes beyond just the search, right? It's similar to the way ChatGPT would be working using a language model. And as you said, I mean, we have used, I would say, AI or advanced modeling capabilities, I would say. Well, some people wouldn't say it's not really AI, to address specific problems. And the way it came is it was not a push to do AI because AI was there. It was just a push to resolve a problem that we were faced. So, for example, we have a complex portfolio in the company, and we know that, we're in software, right? So software, it's B2B software. There's a bit of creativity, and it's not necessarily just following a standard list price. But so it's making the life of pricers and salespeople a bit difficult, right? So we have created ways to, based on the pattern or what the customers are operating or using currently, to see what type of portfolio and what price point we can generate. And it's essentially historical data. It doesn't link to any other data, so it's just a way to do similarity analysis and come up with recommendations that the people, whether in pricing or in sales, can use. We are using also another example is as we all do, we work on the sales compensation plan, right? So sales comp design. In a company like us, we have 2,000, 3,000 salespeople across the globe, and when we start touching components of the sales comp, we worry about the efficiency of the plan and the cost of the plan, right? So we have developed also advanced modeling capabilities using models. It's a combination of Monte Carlo models and a few other techniques to come up with risk analysis on the comp, sales comp, based on patterns of achievements or that we would have seen in the past. But that's really where we are. There is no specific ROI in the examples I provided. We are currently looking at AI more on the transaction processing side today, right? So if I can talk to that now.
Yeah,
right? So,
absolutely.
So we have done a decent job on automation. We have built robots. We have I think the transaction processing, we pushed it to a point where we have reached the limit of scalability. So now we are in a situation where, as the business grows, as the number of transactions grows, we have to add bodies, right, to the staff to process those. And right now, that's really the thinking. Our thinking is to see if AI, by using AI in the transaction processing, we will reach another level in terms of, limit to the scalability. So, example, it can be document validation. It can be reading contracts. It can be all those type of things. For example, when again in software, revenue recognition is essential. So you have to go through reading documents. And we have found that the technology today can help accelerating processing this information, and that's what we are going to be working on in the next couple of years. That's what we have today. In the analytics, we are not there yet. We have first, there are limitations. So I'm not authorizing people to send massive amount of data to outside, right? So we have to go with internal models, which is a limiting factor. We don't have yet. We have never created within the company like this center, like some companies have done, like analytic center, right? So you set a department to do that in Portugal, for example. Companies did that. So we have not done that. So the analysis stays within the FP&A business partnering function, right? So this is where we are today, and we have been thinking about creating those departments. But at the end of the day, maybe we're going to skip that step. Instead of sending the data to a department, if we can send it to a machine and get the same results faster, we might be in the same situation as countries who went directly from no phone to cell phone without going through the landline. So that's kind of the idea. But we are a bit far away from that today.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess, Derek, you probably have a different perspective on this topic, right? So you kind of alluded to earlier a little bit more lumpiness in sort of the transaction cycle, more lead time, a little bit more, being intertwined with sort of the engineers and some of those folks, right? But have you come across a need or a use case for AI in your processes? How is that kind of conversation going at your organization?
Yeah, I think that fundamentally, Skynet scares the crap out of me. So I'm a little circumspect on AI generally. I think there's a lot of good uses, but it's a little terrifying also. I think we're all at a moment where I think people are looking for the best uses for AI, and on the finance side, there's some areas that it can help, but it's not quite there yet. I mean, we use extraordinarily little AI in our business. We're very IP sensitive. We're not going to be sending a bunch of data out there and hoping it all stays secure. And a lot of the work that we're doing on the technical side, it's about the nuance and about kind of individualized innovation. There's no large language model that's going to give us a different answer than it's going to give somebody else. So if we're going to innovate as a company, we've got to do that ourselves. With that being said, I'm sure that there will be applications as we get larger and the amount of data that we're dealing with is kind of insurmountable for humans. But for right now, I think that kind of the 80-20 world doesn't work on finance. Like we don't want to spend 20% of the time to get 80% correct result. Like if I show my board inaccurate, financial projections, it's my fault. It doesn't matter if I did it quickly or took a long time. So I think we're still striving for hitting a very, very high quality result, even if that takes a little bit more time on the surface, until we see more advanced applications that we can really utilize with a high degree of confidence. And again, to kind of the lumpiness of what we're doing in the large transaction side, that lends itself toward that human touch to make sure that we're giving the customer exactly what we need, that the facts and figures that we provide are exactly right. So for right now, we are not looking to kind of cut time and expense there, but I'm sure we will in the future.
Yeah. So that's a pretty good segue to, I think, our last topic before we leave a little bit of room at the end so we can, field some questions from the audience. So I'll stick with you, Derek, on this. So all right, shifting back from AI, getting back more into, the human side of things and thinking about sort of your finance teams and what was pretty common across this group when we were kind of talking and planning for this session was there's a high degree of business partnership embedded in each of your organizations. So, and that is sort of the main trend we see in the modern workforce, right? There's, breaking down those silos and making sure that the finance teams are fluent in the business, right? And showing value on that side. So I think if we start with you, Derek, right? Because very scientific, big picture sort of world that you're living in here with the hydrogen process you described earlier. What do you expect out of your finance team? What is sort of how that works with some of those folks that maybe aren't finance as a background, right? And how do you guys interact and work to come up with the best results?
So first off, I have an amazing finance team. I think it has been kind of utmost importance to make sure that we've got a very high quality team of very smart and capable people on the finance side, but also that have a passion for what we're doing as a company and a desire to learn what it is. I don't want anyone on my team that's keeping score, right? And then we'll later report that. Understanding what is behind the numbers is super important. And then developing a great relationship with the stakeholders that are producing these numbers, understanding the process that an engineer might be going through and the result that they're trying to achieve, and when aggregating information and kind of putting that into a master budget, making sure that everyone on our team on the finance side is well aware of what the company is trying to accomplish, because I think that enables us to have a two-way street. When we've got a finance business partner that's working with an engineering leader and they're saying, oh, I think I'm going to spend X. And they say, well, why? What are you working on? Well, we're working on this project and that. And it's possible for a finance business partner to say, well, that seems similar to what we're doing elsewhere in the business, or this seems like a lot of money. Can you really walk me through like how important this is and why? And you can develop relationships to the point where you can help co-create the expectations from a department if you really care enough to learn that. And I think for us, that's one of the most important aspects, because we're a smaller team. It is possible to understand, what our different business units are doing and what the goals are. And if you have that responsibility and privilege to look across the whole business and have those conversations, you can be that connective tissue, which allows us hopefully to make better decisions.
Yeah, well said. Ludo, how about you?
Yeah, so we have about 150 FP&A people in the company, 150, 200. And that's part of the transformation we did a few years back when I was in FP&A, leading the FP&A. We were essentially doing reporting, budget control, and things like that, right? So and that was a fairly strong limitation in our ability to create value. So we were talking about this morning. We talked about accountability, empowerment. We had business leaders which we couldn't really assist very well into generating this value, we went through a fairly deep transformation program, which combined technology, organization, methodologies as well, to totally restructure what we were doing. And in essence, what we did is, we went through the various customers, internal customers, understand what was needed on their end to be accountable and to take decisions. We put that in a system ultimately, and we structured the FP&A team around that. So we categorized people into corporate FP&A, where people doing more modeling, reporting still. We created Center of Excellence to take care of all the anything that is automated and linked to cost controlling, I would say, the cost controlling part of that. And we created roles of business partners, which we have embedded in the business. So they have to work hand in hand with the stakeholders with two main objectives at the end of the day. It's to generate growth and generate efficiency in the business. So they are part of the management team, as any other member of an executive team would be in a company. So we went from reporting to being, providing. It's more than insight. It's more than that. We provide a full set of services as I would say, mini CFO in those organizations. That's what we are asking the business partner to be.
When you were going through that shift, was there any secret sauce here in terms of gaining credibility with the business, in terms of getting those folks sort of to be seen as value add, or was it purely just, proof is in the pudding?
I would say there was a lot of change management, both internal, external. I mean, internal to the finance and external vis-a-vis the stakeholders. A lot of explanation to do. I would say it's not perfect yet. The struggle in terms of change has been to evolve the profiles of the people we had in the team, right? So it's very difficult to transform somebody from reporting to business advisor, financial advisor to the business. So it requires business acumen, it requires communication, it requires critical thinking, which are not necessarily given. And I would say if there is one limitation, and in the areas where we have not performed according to what we were the plan, are areas where we failed to be able to make those profiles move to the level of quality we wanted to provide. Yeah.
Valerie, similar situation for your organization, or how are you approaching business partnering?
Well, I think since I've entered finance, my early days in finance was really focused on strategic finance and that finance business partner role. And we've seen finance evolve over the past 10 to 15 years, where it used to be more, like Ludo was saying, FP&A was reporting and going the budgets versus actuals. And we've seen that evolution with finance playing a much bigger role. And like Ludo says, as a finance professional, you need to understand the business, and you really need to partner with the different functions so they see you as a partner. I'm sure everyone in this room has been in experience where it's kind of like, oh, finance is here, or uh-oh, finance is here, with the negative connotation about your finance team. And so it's so important for your finance team to really partner with the business. And that means learning that business, and that means creating relationships so you understand the business and you're working with them to not only cut costs, but understand what are opportunities for growth, what is the ROI, and really how do you create value and help move the business forward, and know that the finance team is part of that, and to build that relationship so that your business, your functional contacts are actively engaging with finance, and rather than finance coming in and just asking probing questions. And I think most of us are seeing that movement to more of a strategic finance function rather than a pure FP&A function.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's just like what I said, one more thing. It's a lot more fun. And that's what I say to my teams. Yeah. It's a lot more fun than to just do the FP&A. And you have to still do the FP&A, and you have to do it well, and some of the efficiencies that we're gaining today allows to free up that more time to be much more of that business partner and have a consultative part of approach to the business and part of the business.
Yeah, well said. So I know we have about 5 minutes left, so not to cut you off, Doug, but let's see if we have any...
Well, do you want me to fill those 5 minutes so you don't get questions?
No way, man.
So, thanks. Great discussion. I'm actually in the process of building out my FP&A function within my organization. It kind of spurred because we're in the process of implementing OneStream, and I quickly realized that we were very heavily focused on the enterprise level type of reporting things. We weren't really doing the analytics that we needed. We definitely weren't doing the business partnering, right? And so we're pushing into that space. So I guess I would ask the panel, what advice do you have as I'm pushing into that business space and trying to connect what we do on the FP&A side to provide more strategic, well, actually it's tactical, operational, and strategic value for the organization at all levels.
I can have at least provide a bit of a point of view on one angle. Right? So the integration to the business is key. Right? The one decision I took at the time to make sure that the finance and the FP&A team is integrated in the business is I loosen the relationship, hierarchical relationship between the boss of FP&A or the CFO to those individual business partners, to the point where I think one of you made the comment, right? So it's not finance is coming in the room. So now I have a business leader coming and tell me that we have a problem or this and that, and asking, the finance opinion or whatever it is on the problem. The first thing I'm going to ask is, did you work that with your guy that I've provided to you? Right? So it's having a full embed has greatly facilitated the adoption of the model, and it also goes with accountability, right, and empowerment, because you can build an FP&A structure that talks to the finance, and you are going to end up doing corporate finance, corporate FP&A, right? So if you have empowered your business leaders and you provide them with a level of services that they are going to be able to function and take decisions on their own without necessarily reporting up and down, that's probably the one of the key success. Certainly not the only one, but I think as far as the experience I had, it was essential to make it successful.
And I'll just add for me, having sort of partnered with a lot of organizations that have gone through what you're about to go through, genuinely, it makes so much more of a difference if the CFO is active in that effort, and energetic, accountable, and willing to change on your ends as well, right? And what I mean by that is there's a lot of momentum usually at the beginning of those types of programs, and then something else will take the attention. It'll get delegated down to a director maybe to kind of run with it. And then ultimately we'll get into that same pattern of behavior on the annual plan process, where rather than actually trusting the numbers, listening to the people in the business, it becomes, we need to grow by 10%, make it happen, right? And that is where people start to lose a lot of their momentum and their passion around that transformation. It was when they're like, oh, we're just putting in new technology, but we're doing the same thing, right? So I think it does start with the CFO level, and being consistent throughout and being visible. I've just, in my projects, those ones are the most, we were talking about this before, like going live is not success. It's the adoption and the growth and the evolution after going live. So that would be my 2 cents.
Oftentimes when you're going through your implementation, commonality and transparency can be enemies because it's a finance project, and ultimately we want to be able to get our reporting. That's what we've been tasked with. That's why we went down the path of this project. And so we want to get that non-financial information. And what we do as part of that implementation project, we say, how do we common size this non-financial information coming in? And so we set up a data warehouse, massages all the information, and we can drill back to that data warehouse. Instead, can we get our systems out into the field, into the operations folks, where they're putting stuff immediately into there? And we still have some commonality there, but we haven't made that trade-off of, hey, we want to be transparent at a level. We want to be transparent at the business level, not at the finance level. Now, as a former CFO, and there's some people in here who sign, SOX statements, there's a certain level you want to know, but you don't want to know all the way down because you'll be doing it forever. So get people ingesting information from operations directly into the system. And that's how you solve that commonality transparency trade-off. You're able to look down, they're still able to operate the business and how they see fit. And what you'll see is it may force some change management on their part that allows them to be quicker as well, because they're operating little mini businesses themselves. And they want to know they want to know the financial information and the operational information as early as possible too, not rely on you to send it back down to them. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you very much. Please give it a round of applause for our panel. Lunch is next.